Professor Oke Ikechukwu, who's a member of the editorial board of This Day newspaper and is also a professor of strategic management and human capital development. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. Let me start with you, Prof. What's your insight into the latest Nigerian elections? Because first you had a disputed presidential election, which many see or saw as a big flop, and now you've got a second round of voting, which INEC has been forced to postpone.
Well, the first one, you know, somebody went to the stream to fetch water. He's struggling to get onto plain ground from the hill because the water point is low. And while he is on that hill struggling, trying not to allow the pot to fall, somebody says, "Oh, when are you coming back for another pot of water?" He will turn and say, "What? Is it not best you allow me get home with this one if I can?" So we can't begin to talk about the second election while the first is in limbo.
I thought you were going to say that it's a technologically driven election. So, the other person would have just said, "Well, can I stick a pipe through there and pipe the water to my
your
house?"
The real issue there is this. If voting is, you can't vote without accreditation, and this is a polling unit, and we have two instances of overvoting. Question number one, where did they get the extra ballot paper from? How come they voted? So the very notion of overvoting, in my view, and I may be mistaken, points to a simple fact that for all instances of overvoting, INEC, in my view, was duty-bound to deem that no election took place. In one case, up to 3,000. Nationally, in hundreds of thousands. The concept contradicts the simple fact that there is a voters register, there's the accreditation process. Some people got to the point that they voted and then you found out the number was in excess. Also answer this question for me. How did you distinguish between the legitimate votes and the ones that are not legitimate since you didn't use the beavers? And you know most of these overvoting cases came from a particular part of the country. So we can't just insult ourselves and look facts in the face while doing that. I'm not also aware that there have been cases of prosecution or arrests. There was a video clip alleging that a certain Oluomo was the person in that video and that a police constable or officer or whatever was. We saw the faces. That unit is known. The person posted there from the law enforcement agencies is known. The face of the man saying that certain people cannot vote there is known. Is there any case of arrest? Are there issues raised? No. And in state where people are not allowed to vote. So putting all of that together and also looking at the discrepancies between papers arising from the booths, from the units, and what INEC has put up, there's more than ample justification for contesting the election, for doubting the integrity of the outcome, for questioning the declared winner. But three things must not be added to these things I've said. Number one, it does not authorize anybody to go out in the streets and make trouble. Number two, the only proper way of challenging is to get the evidence and go to court. Number three, it would seem that a culture of endorsement of shamelessness is taking over the political space, and we should worry about the effect of that on the younger generation.
Those are very good points. You know. Let me come to you, Donu. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that we're still trying to assess the extent of the technical glitches that led to INEC's monumental flop, as some have described it, in the presidential election. The most technically advanced poll also becoming at once the most technically disastrous. I mean, how do you see it all?
Well, I wasn't surprised. I mean, this is a country in which in the 21st century we struggle to provide ourselves with electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is a country in which the internet connections are so faulty that people have started buying Elon Musk's Starlink satellite dishes from outside the country in the desperate hope of getting normal connectivity. So, you know, I never really expected this whole technical hoo-ha. I never really believed in it. I knew there would be glitches. And of course, I'm far more concerned about the fraud and the violence. I don't want to, gloss over the technicalities because they're critical. especially vis-a-vis the legal challenges. But what I don't get is exactly what Oke has just said. You have people running helter-skelter. The Financial Times newspaper said that they witnessed armed men snatching ballot boxes in Surulere in Lagos. We have so many examples in my own home state of Rivers of extreme malfeasance.
And I'm going to want to talk about Rivers State a little bit as we go forward, but please continue.
So, where are the arrests? And this thing about the legal challenges bothers me as well. I mean, somebody said something very flippant, but I think it's so true, is when your opponent advises you breezily to go to court, his uncle is probably the judge.
Well, some would argue that, yes, you may have a point, others perhaps that you don't. But let me come to you, Prof. I mean, it all seems surreal, to be honest, because when I think of the build-up and all the stuff that repeatedly we were hearing from INEC almost daily, this is a system that can't be tampered with, all the promises, all the assurances, so much excitement, so much hope. Then the day arrives and it all turns into a bizarre spectacle, if ever there was one. I mean, what's the hardest part of this election process for you to accept?
Everything. As in everything. Because I was one of those most shocked. Shocked for three reasons. Reason number one, Mahmood himself.
Yes.
A very thoroughly organized, efficient, and self-respecting individual.
Yeah, but to be fair, Mahmood can't do it all himself. He has
can't.
to
I'm
delegate
leading up to that.
responsibility. Yeah.
So, given who he is and all of that, he's not flippant, he's not frivolous. So if he didn't have his build-up facts, he wouldn't have been so adamant. He wouldn't have been so specific. He wouldn't have told us there must be the beavers. And you recall I also appeared on air a couple of times on this matter, and really making the point that if the beavers are insisted upon, we're going to have credible results.
Absolutely.
So that's on one side. The other side is that there's Mahmood as a person, there's a machinery under him, and then there's the political economy of daredevilry and brazen debauchery all over the place, and which ends up damaging every, INEC chairman. But the concern, and it relates to him, was that some people also expected that some basic adherence to logic and common sense would have advised paths other than the one taken, which is the brazen uploading of results with the kind of things that are coming out from Rivers State and all kinds of places. And the question then arose, why? Everybody who knows him knows he couldn't have been money. How old is he and all of that? Is there some pressure? Is there blackmail? Is it the kind of thing you see in films and, okay, you're talking, you say you're going to do this, and then you get a call, you say, okay, we hear you're angry about so and so. It's all right, but you remember that your son, not the one in this place, but this other one, we just saw him leaving the lecture room or going to shop with his wife. I'm sure you wouldn't want anything to happen with him. Not that we're saying anything will happen. You know that kind of stuff. We don't know whether that was happened to Mahmood. Now, the second thing you are talking about, what one found atrocious, not just unacceptable, is the point I made, which he has repeated, that all of this can happen. And we walk around smiling and we're walking towards the inauguration. And there's no indication that the evidence available to law enforcement agencies matter. Now, what's the incentive?
Human beings. But, I'm not entirely convinced that he and his staff have not been compromised, at least some of them. God forgive me, and Professor Mahmood and staff forgive me if I'm wrong. But I see no evidence of, strict compliance and determination to strictly comply. It's the same thing with law enforcement. Look, there are good people everywhere, there are bad people everywhere. Nothing anybody tells me will persuade me to believe that some of the law enforcement officials have not been compromised. There's no other explanation except extreme stupidity. Now, maybe because there's been such an uproar about the rubbish that happened the first time, maybe everybody will pull their socks up and perform better next weekend, right? But, I am in despair. I mean, the whole... This whole thing is so shocking. Even the attempt.
Believe me, you're not alone. I
Yeah.
mean, there is an extraordinary sense of despair
Yes.
across Nigeria. I mean, that's just being factual.
Yes.
And I think you convey that feeling quite well. But Prof,
Can I just say
oh
something?
yeah, of course.
Something that I'm also extremely concerned about the big lie that this Peter Obi thing is a tribal war between, especially in Lagos, between Igbos and Yorubas. I can tell you, 95% of my Yoruba friends voted for Peter Obi. I can assure you of that. And they are even more depressed than I am right now.
Right.
Sometimes I'm even the one consoling them and saying, well, is Tinubu really that bad?
Yeah. Well, let me come to you, Prof, because obviously, as we said, this thing is bogged down in a legal challenge now. I mean, INEC has assured the court that all the data and material used for the presidential election will be properly saved and will be secured. Do you have any doubts about that?
Yeah, in every sense of the word, absolute doubt, not just doubt, mistrust. And I will even take it further to say unlikely to believe INEC. And concerning the comment I made, that's different from what I said, is different from endorsing Mahmoud. I said, given what I know, I'm surprised about this. That's different from saying he was or was not compromised. I'm not in a position to comment on that. So, going forward, I believe, to the minds of some of us, the electoral body has traded off a substantial percentage of its right to be believed. So that much of speculation and suspicion will undermine even frank efforts. So specific to your question, no, I don't believe it. If what we've seen, what we saw in the election, what we've seen after the election, and the reflexes and the explanations, which is really like, okay, look, your dress is torn, I need to patch it, but it's made of wool. You say, no, use cotton. The important thing is for the flesh not to be seen. That's how much of INEC's this thing. And it's painful to me for two major reasons. The amount of effort that went into very honest communication about how this election would work. I wouldn't want to be in Mahmoud's position. I mean, Festus Okoye probably is in coma right now. Because he was all over.
On Arise television last night.
I know.
I can't sort of pass judgment on what he looked like, but he certainly was quite lucid and quite clear on what he had to say.
To watch all that effort, and this is the outcome, you ask yourself, what have I done with my life for 4 years? So it's also enough. They are human, they are feeling bad, but it doesn't remove the fact that as a Nigerian, looking at that institution, if you ask me, this institution now, okay, do you trust this institution now? Given that experience, my answer will be no. If you don't understand English, I'll say 9 in German. If you don't hear, I'll use sign language. INEC has got itself into a bad corner, and it must try to get out of it.
Well, and account for the money it's spent.
Well, in that regard, the bulk. Let's face it. If you disaggregate costs, they are the headings are identifiable. But it's a waste that the nation should blow away that volume of trillions of naira and then get insulted in addition. It's not right.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But nevertheless, the elections, the governorship and state assembly elections have been postponed. They're taking place on the 18th. Let's look at your state, Rivers.
Yes. And nobody at the center says, you know what, you can't do this. You can't get away with it.
That's a good point.
You know? The same thing happened in 2019. The same thing happened in 2015. And it's not only Wike and PDP. Sometimes the APC have also been very guilty of acts of barbarity. And
so how's it looking then in the context of what you just told us?
Let's put it this way. I registered in my village to vote so that I would have a say about the people who is my senator, who is my House of Reps, who is my governor, right? And I have been advised not to come home, not to go home for the election. Because,
so your vote is lost, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I've been told that there's going to be so much bloody hand-to-hand combat with plenty of gunshots and all the rest of it. And I've personally witnessed that myself. I mean, every other election before this, I've been home. The last time there were bullets flying in my village. The time before that, we went to visit an APC chieftain, and there was a dead body in his backyard. It's constant. So that is Rivers State for you. And I'm afraid Wike, who is a lawyer and should know better, has not made things any better. I won't say he's the sole culprit, but I am very, very, very ashamed of him, quite frankly, because I think he could have done a lot better. You know, there are different ways of becoming famous. There are different ways of winning. You can win by, securing your candidate, your successor. You can also win by being known to have stood back and said, hey guys, I'm going to provide you with good options, you choose. Why is it that Nigerian politicians, so few of them, care about their long-term reputations? It's like anything goes, short-term, the end justifies the means. As long as we get what we want now, it doesn't matter. The swagger.
Well, let me bring you in, Prof, because I don't know what your thoughts are on the way the governorship election. I mean, we thought the presidential election was hot. I mean, this looks like a frigging furnace here. I mean, and in light of some of the things that Donu just said and what you already know about other sort of parts of the country, do you expect voter turnout to be low? I mean, I wouldn't go out to vote in those circumstances.
Well, I expect actually vote. For those who will be there, I believe they will come out to vote. There are local interests, there are local actors who have already kind of immunized themselves against the fears those of us who come in and go out have. But in the specific case of Rivers State, like Donu said, is not new. It's when Amechi was there, even all the back to all the last time, it's always been there. The unfortunate thing in the present case is that I saw Wike as a man who had a chance to become a national hero. I wrote about him twice in the paper. The first one was governors. Look at Wike. When he gave marching orders to local government chairmen, look, you know your place, you know your people. If you don't pick out those running illegal refineries and poisoning, I'll deal with you. Then the second one, I think, was because on the PDP thing. Now, what I see is a man who, first, beholden to fairness, came on the public scene, spoke up on VAT and the rest of it.
Yes,
then, he was fantastic.
He was fantastic on the VAT.
Even after, I remember after that, somebody said, oh, I can give you his number. I said, call him for what? He's done a good thing. My job is to comment on it. I'm not looking for his friendship and all of that. And that's how you help people in office. Now, what do we have? A total self-diminution without mercy. First, he began to derail. He was now dressing like a cowboy. He thinks he'll go back to secondary school. He won't have a chance. Now, all of that began to take away a man who was about to rise to a new calling. And then what happened? Physically to go and threaten voters, challenge, as alleged, those computing results. And the question is Wike looking around? Let him look at all the people who he knows who have been governors since 1999. How many of them have a forwarding address? They look like chickens. They need policemen to go anywhere. Would anybody get Wike to understand how he'll be feeling 6, 7, 9 months from now? So he had a chance to
your candidate, your successor. You can also win by being known to have stood back and said, hey guys, I'm going to provide you with good options, you choose. Why is it that Nigerian politicians, so few of them, care about their long-term reputations? It's like anything goes, short-term, the end justifies the means. As long as we get what we want now, it doesn't matter. The swagger.
Well, let me bring you in, Prof, because I don't know what your thoughts are on the way the governorship election. I mean, we thought the presidential election was hot. I mean, this looks like a frigging furnace here. I mean, and in light of some of the things that Donu just said and what you already know about other sort of parts of the country, Do you expect voter turnout to be low? I mean, I wouldn't go out to vote in those circumstances.
Well, I expect actually for those who will be there, I believe they will come out to vote. There are local interests, there are local actors who have already kind of immunized themselves against the fears those of us who come in and go out have. But in the specific case of Rivers State, like Donu said, is not new. It's when Amechi was there, even all the back to all the last time, it's always been there. The unfortunate thing in the present case is that I saw Wike as a man who had a chance to become a national hero. I wrote about him twice in the paper. The first one was governors. Look at Wike. When he gave marching orders to local government chairmen, look, you know your place, you know your people. If you don't pick out those running illegal refineries and poisoning the I'll deal with you. Then the second one, I think, was because on the PDP thing. Now, what I see is a man who, first, beholden to fairness, came on the public scene, spoke up on VAT and the rest of it.
Yes,
Then,
he
was fantastic.
He was fantastic on the VAT.
Even
issue.
after, I remember after that, somebody said, oh, I can give you his number. I said, call him for what? He's done a good thing. My job is to comment on it. I'm not looking for his friendship and all of that. And that's how you help people in office. Now, what do we have? A total self-diminution without mercy. First, he began to derail. He was now dressing like a cowboy. He thinks he'll go back to secondary school. He won't have a chance. Now, all of that began to take away a man who was about to rise to a new calling. And then what happened? Physically to go and threaten voters, challenge, as alleged, those computing results. And the question is Wike looking around? Let him look at all the people who he knows who have been governors since 1999. How many of them have a forwarding address? They look like chickens. They need policemen to go anywhere. Would anybody get Wike to understand how he would be feeling 6, 7, 9 months from now? So he had a chance to become part of the new future of Nigeria. He aborted it himself.
And by the way, Rivers people did not give Wike permission to hand our votes over to Tinubu. You know?
Right. Well, we've got about a minute or so, sadly. The time is almost out. He doesn't like it when...
I don't know what happens to their timepiece.
Well, it's just that you guys, you're so interesting that you forget that the time is going. But just very quickly, Donu, do you agree with him? And based on the things that you said, that, I mean, he thinks that people are going to turn out, but a lot of people suggest that because of the disaffection from the presidential election, as well as the issues that you're talking about, it could lead to an even smaller turnout of voters. We've got about 40 seconds, I'm afraid.
It certainly put me off. I might still just jump on a plane next week and go home to vote and risk my life. But I think Nigerians have to become more courageous generally. We have to fight. I mean, nothing. Freedom is seized, not given. That's what I'm beginning to understand. I'm not saying people should go AWOL on the streets, but there needs to be more protest.
Well, if you're going, please be careful, because we'd like to have you back again.
Thank you.
Donu Kabara is, of course, former BBC and Times of London journalist and currently a well-known newspaper columnist. And of course, thank you very much indeed, Professor Oke Ikechukwu, who is the Executive Director of Development Specs Academy, member of the editorial board of This Day newspaper, and a Professor of Strategic Management and Human Capital Development. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Kaduna, bye-bye and thank you for watching.